was a quiet evening in the small town of Cedar Ridge, where life moved at a slow pace and everyone knew each other by name. The streets were lined with cozy houses, family-owned shops, and the occasional diner that served as a gathering spot for locals. On this particular night, the air was cool, carrying the faint scent of pine trees from the nearby forest. Most people had already retreated to their homes, enjoying the comfort of dinner or settling down to watch TV. But not Emily Parker. Emily was a hard-working 24-year-old waitress at Betty's Diner, one of the busiest spots in town. She had spent her entire shift rushing between tables, serving burgers, fries, and milkshakes to hungry customers. By the time her shift ended at 9 p.m., she was exhausted, but determined to make it home quickly. Her cat, Whiskers, would be waiting for her, and Emily hated keeping him alone for too long. So instead of taking the usual route through the main road, she decided to cut through an alleyway behind the diner. It was a shortcut she had taken many times before, one that saved her a good 10 minutes of walking. The alley wasn't particularly well lit, but Emily didn't think much of it. She had walked through it dozens of times without any trouble. Tonight, however, something felt different. As she stepped into the narrow passageway, the sound of her footsteps echoed off the brick walls, creating an eerie rhythm. The dim orange glow of the streetlights barely reached the shadows, and the air seemed heavier than usual. Still, Emily shrugged off the feeling. "You're just tired," she muttered to herself, clutching her bag tightly against her side. But then she heard it, a low murmur coming from further down the alley. At first she thought it might be stray cats or maybe someone rummaging through the trash bins. Curiosity got the better of her, so she slowed her pace and peeked around the corner. What she saw made her blood run cold. A group of men stood huddled near a large black van parked at the far end of the alley. They wore leather jackets adorned with patches and insignias, their faces partially hidden beneath bandanas and helmets. Bikers. Emily recognized them immediately. They were part of a notorious gang that had been causing trouble in neighboring towns. Rumors about their illegal activities, drug deals, thefts, even violent confrontations, had spread like wildfire, but no one in Cedar Ridge had ever dared to cross paths with them. Until now. One of the bikers, clearly the leader, turned his head slightly, and Emily froze. His name was Jake Malone, a man known for his ruthless reputation and commanding presence. He had sharp features, piercing eyes, and a scar running along his jawline that gave him an even more intimidating look. Jake barked orders to his crew, his voice gruff and authoritative. They nodded in response, loading something heavy into the back of the van. Emily couldn't see what it was, but she didn't want to stick around to find out. Her instinct screamed at her to leave, to turn back and run as fast as she could. But before she could move, one of the bikers spotted her. "Hey!" he shouted, pointing directly at her. "There's someone here!" Panic surged through Emily's body. She dropped her bag and bolted, her sneakers slapping against the pavement as she sprinted toward the other end of the alley. Her heart pounded wildly in her chest, each beat urging her to go faster. Behind her, she could hear the angry shouts of the bikers growing louder as they gave chase. Their heavy boots thundered against the ground, closing the distance between them with alarming speed. Emily zigzagged through the narrow pathway, desperately searching for an escape route. But the alley offered no refuge, just towering brick, walls on either side and dead ends wherever she looked. Just when she thought she might actually outrun them, one of the bikers lunged forward and grabbed her by the arm. Emily screamed, struggling to break free, but another biker quickly joined in, pinning her arms behind her back. "Let me go," she cried, kicking and thrashing with all her might. But her efforts were futile against their combined strength. Within seconds, they had forced her to the ground, tying her wrists with rough rope. Emily's mind raced as tears streamed down her face. Why were they doing this? What did they want from her? Jake Malone stepped forward, his shadow looming over her trembling figure. "Shut up," he snarled, grabbing her chin roughly and forcing her to meet his gaze. "You shouldn't have stuck your nose where it doesn't belong." Emily tried to speak, to beg for mercy, but the words caught in her throat. Jake signaled to his men and they hoisted her to her feet, dragging her toward the van. She kicked and screamed again, but it only earned her a sharp slap across the face. Stars danced in her vision as pain shot through her cheek, leaving her dazed and powerless. As they shoved her into the van and slammed the door shut, Emily's world plunged into darkness. The engine roared to life and the vehicle lurched forward, speeding away from the scene. She curled up in the corner, sobbing uncontrollably, unsure of what fate awaited her. Would anyone realize she was missing? Would anyone come looking for her? Unbeknownst to Emily or the bikers, two men were nearby. John Cena and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson were strolling down the street just a block away, enjoying a rare moment of relaxation after wrapping up a day of filming a movie in the area. They had chosen Cedar Ridge for its peaceful atmosphere, a welcome change from the chaos of Hollywood. Both men were dressed casually, blending in perfectly with the townsfolk as they discussed their plans for dinner. "I'm telling you, man," said John, gesturing enthusiastically, "we should check out that barbecue place downtown. I heard their ribs are legendary." The Rock chuckled, shaking his head. "Barbecue sounds great, but we're not skipping dessert. That pie shop you mentioned earlier, we're hitting that up too." Their conversation came to an abrupt halt when they heard faint cries echoing from the direction of the alley. Both men stopped in their tracks, exchanging concerned glances. "Did you hear that?" John asked, his brow furrowing. "Yeah, I did," replied The Rock, his expression turning serious. Without another word, they hurried toward the source of the noise, their instincts kicking in. When they reached the alley, they found evidence of a struggle: a broken bracelet lying on the ground, tire marks scuffed into the dirt, and Emily's abandoned bag lying open, its contents spilled across the pavement. John crouched down, picking up the bag and examining its contents. "This belongs to someone," he said grimly. "And judging by the signs, whoever it is didn't leave here willingly." The Rock clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "We can't just stand here. If someone's been taken, we need to act fast." Using John's phone, they called the local police to report the incident. But both men knew waiting for backup wasn't an option. Time was of the essence, and every second counted. After a brief discussion, they decided to take matters into their own hands. Spotting a pickup truck parked outside a nearby gas station, they approached the owner, explained the situation, and borrowed the vehicle with permission. With adrenaline coursing through their veins, John and The Rock set off in pursuit of the kidnappers, following the trail of tire marks that led out of town. Neither man spoke much during the drive, their focus entirely on the task ahead. They didn't know who they were dealing with or what dangers lay in store, but one thing was certain: they weren't going to let fear stop them. Not when an innocent life was on the line. Little did the bikers know, their reckless actions had drawn the attention of two unlikely heroes. And, soon enough, they would learn the hard way that messing with the wrong people comes with consequences. The pickup truck rumbled along the dark, deserted highway as John Cena gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles turning white. Beside him, Dwayne, "The Rock" Johnson, leaned forward, scanning the road ahead with sharp eyes. The tire marks they were following had led them out of Cedar Ridge and into a vast stretch of open land surrounded by dense woods. It was eerily quiet, save for the hum of the engine and the occasional chirp of crickets in the distance. Neither man spoke much during the drive, but their minds were racing. Both knew the stakes were high. Whoever these bikers were, they weren't amateurs. They had taken Emily without hesitation, showing no regard for her safety or the law, and now it was up to John and The Rock to stop them before things escalated further. "We're getting close," The Rock said finally, breaking the silence. He pointed toward a set of fresh tracks cutting across the dirt road. "Those marks are still clear. They haven't been here long." John nodded, his jaw clenched. "Good. Let's hope we can catch them before they reach wherever they're going." As they continued driving, the landscape grew more desolate. The trees loomed taller, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers against the night sky. Up ahead, a faint glow appeared on the horizon, a sign of life in an otherwise barren area. As they drew closer, the source of the light became clearer: an old, abandoned warehouse. Its windows were shattered, its walls covered in graffiti, and its roof partially caved in. A black van was parked outside, its engine still warm. "They're here," John muttered under his breath, pulling the truck to a stop behind some bushes, a safe distance away. He turned off the headlights and killed the engine, ensuring they wouldn't be spotted immediately. The Rock opened the door slowly, stepping out onto the gravel path. He squinted at the warehouse, his expression grim. This place looks like trouble waiting to happen. Yeah, but if Emily's inside, we don't have a choice, John replied, joining him. We need a plan. For a moment, both men stood silently, assessing the situation. The warehouse wasn't heavily guarded, at least not visibly, but that didn't mean there weren't dangers lurking within. Jake Malone and his gang weren't known for playing fair, and they likely wouldn't hesitate to use violence if cornered. I'll go in first, John suggested, his tone firm. I'll create a distraction to draw them out. You sneak around the back and see if you can find Emily. The Rock shook his head. No way, bro, you're not doing this alone. We stick together. It's too risky, John insisted. If we both go in at the same time, they'll spot us. Trust me, I've got this. Reluctantly, the Rock agreed. Fine. But if anything goes wrong, you signal me. Got it? Got it, John said with a nod. With their plan in place, they moved cautiously toward the warehouse. John approached from the front, staying low to avoid being seen. The Rock circled around to the rear, using the shadows cast by the trees to conceal his movements. Every step felt deliberate, every breath measured. The tension in the air was palpable, pressing down on them like a heavy weight. When John reached the entrance, he paused, listening carefully. Inside, he could hear muffled voices, angry, gruff tones arguing over something. Steeling himself, he stepped forward and pounded his fist against the metal door 3 times, loud enough to echo throughout the building. Hey, he shouted, his voice booming with authority. Whoever's in there, come out now. For a moment, there was silence. Then the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from within. The door swung open violently, revealing Jake Malone and several of his men. Their faces were twisted with rage, their hands balled into fists. Jake stepped forward, glaring at John with pure hatred. Who the hell are you? He growled, cracking his knuckles menacingly. I'm Cena, John replied, standing tall, despite being outnumbered. And I suggest you let that girl go unless you want trouble. The bikers erupted into laughter, clearly amused by his boldness. One of them sneered. You think you can take all of us on, tough guy? John didn't respond. Instead, he shifted into a defensive stance, his muscles tensing as he prepared for what was coming next. Without warning, one of the bikers lunged at him, swinging a punch aimed at his face. But John dodged effortlessly, countering with a swift strike to the man's stomach that sent him doubling over in pain. Seeing their comrade fall, the rest of the bikers charged at once. Fists flew and chaos erupted. John moved with precision, using his strength and agility to fend off multiple attackers at once. Each punch he threw landed with pinpoint accuracy, sending bikers stumbling backward. Despite their numbers, they struggled to keep up with his relentless pace. Meanwhile, the Rock had made his way to the back of the warehouse. He slipped through a broken window, careful not to make a sound. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint smell of oil. Crates and machinery littered the space, providing plenty of cover as he crept deeper into the building. It didn't take long for him to find Emily. She was tied to a wooden chair in the center of the room, her head bowed and her body trembling. Her wrists were bound tightly with rope and tears streaked her cheeks. When she heard footsteps approaching, she looked up, her eyes wide with fear. Please, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Don't hurt me. The Rock held up his hands, speaking softly to calm her. Easy, kid. I'm here to help. My name's Dwayne. You're safe now. Emily blinked, relief washing over her face as she recognized him. You're the Rock, she murmured, her voice trembling. That's right, he said with a reassuring smile. Now let's get you out of here. Kneeling beside her, he worked quickly to untie the ropes binding her wrists. Once she was free, he helped her to her feet, keeping a protective arm around her shoulders. We need to move fast, he told her. My friend is distracting the others outside, but we don't have much time. Emily nodded weakly, clinging to him as they made their way toward the exit. But just as they reached the doorway, one of the bikers appeared, blocking their path. He was large, even by the Rock's standards, with bulging arms and a menacing scowl. Well, the biker sneered, cracking his neck. Looks like we've got ourselves a hero. The Rock stepped in front of Emily, shielding her from view. You don't want to do this, pal, he warned, his tone calm but firm. Walk away while you still can. The biker laughed, flexing his muscles. Big talk for someone who's about to get crushed. Without another word, the biker charged at him, throwing a powerful punch aimed at the Rock's jaw. But the Rock sidestepped easily, grabbing the man's arm and twisting it behind his back. With a grunt, he slammed the biker face first into the wall, knocking him unconscious. Not today, the Rock muttered, brushing his hands together. Turning back to Emily, he gestured for her to follow him. Come on, let's go. Outside, John was still holding his own against the remaining bikers. His shirt was torn and sweat dripped down his forehead, but he showed no signs of slowing down. One by one, his opponents fell, unable to match his speed and skill. Finally, only Jake Malone remained, his face red with fury. You picked the wrong fight tonight, Jake snarled, pulling a crowbar from his belt. He swung it wildly, forcing John to duck and weave to avoid the blows. But John wasn't afraid. He waited for the perfect moment, then grabbed Jake's arm mid-swing, twisting it until the crowbar clattered to the ground. With a fierce shove, he sent Jake stumbling backward, landing hard on the dirt. Before Jake could recover, the Rock emerged from the shadows, guiding Emily safely behind him. Seeing this, Jake roared in anger and lunged toward them, only to be met with a thunderous punch from the Rock that sent him sprawling to the ground. That's enough, the Rock bellowed, his voice echoing across the empty lot. You mess with innocent people, you deal with us. The remaining bikers hesitated, realizing they were no match for the combined strength and skill of John Cena and the Rock. One by one, they fled the scene, leaving Jake unconscious on the dirt floor. Breathing heavily, John turned to the Rock and Emily, a look of relief washing over his face. Is she okay? He asked. She will be, the Rock replied, giving Emily a gentle pat on the shoulder. Thanks to you. Emily wiped her tears, her voice shaky but filled with gratitude. Thank you, both of you. I don't know how to repay you. You don't have to, John said with a smile. Just promise us you'll stay safe from now on. As sirens wailed in the distance, signaling the arrival of the police, John and the Rock exchanged a knowing glance. They had done what needed to be done, and now it was time to let the authorities handle the rest. Quietly, they slipped away before the media arrived, disappearing into the night as quietly as they had come. Back at their hotel, they reflected on the events of the evening. Neither man was surprised by what had happened. It was simply who they were. Heroes, whether in the spotlight or not, always answered the call when it mattered most. The sound of approaching sirens filled the night air as red and blue lights flashed in the distance. John Cena and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson stood near the edge of the warehouse property, watching silently as police cars screeched to a halt beside the abandoned building. Officers poured out, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they assessed the scene. Jake Malone and his unconscious form lay sprawled on the ground, surrounded by the remnants of his gang's chaotic retreat. Emily Parker sat on the steps of the warehouse, wrapped in a blanket provided by one of the paramedics, her trembling body finally beginning to calm. John glanced at the Rock, his expression thoughtful. We should probably get out of here before someone starts asking questions, he said quietly. Agreed, the Rock replied, nodding. Let them handle the rest. Our job's done. With that, the two men slipped away unnoticed, blending into the shadows as easily as they had arrived. They didn't need recognition or applause. They had acted because it was the right thing to do. As they walked back to the borrowed pickup truck parked nearby, neither spoke much. Their minds were still processing everything that had happened, from the moment they heard Emily's cries in the alley to the intense confrontation with the bikers. It wasn't every day you stumbled upon a dangerous situation like this, but for John and the Rock, stepping up was second nature. When they reached the gas station where they had borrowed the truck earlier, They returned it with gratitude, thanking the owner once again for letting them use it. The man smiled warmly, unaware of the drama that had unfolded just miles away. "Anytime, guys," he said cheerfully. "Hope you found what you were looking for." "Oh, we did," the duck replied with a grin, clapping him on the shoulder. "Trust me, you helped save the day." Back at their hotel, John and The Rock settled into the small living room area of their suite. It was late, and exhaustion was starting to set in, but neither felt ready to sleep just yet. Instead, they sat side by side on the couch, sipping cups of coffee and reflecting on the events of the night. "You know," John began after a long pause, "tonight reminded me why we do what we do. I mean, sure, most of the time it's all about movies and wrestling and putting on a show, but moments like this is why people look up to us." The Rock nodded slowly, his gaze distant. "Yeah, bro. Being a role model isn't just about flexing muscles or delivering lines on camera. It's about showing up when it counts. Tonight, we showed up." John chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I gotta admit, though, I wasn't expecting to go toe-to-toe with a gang of bikers while on vacation. That's not exactly how I planned my week." "Tell me about it," The Rock said with a laugh. "But hey, life has a funny way of keeping things interesting, doesn't it?" Their conversation shifted to lighter topics as they tried to unwind. They joked about the absurdity of the situation, imagining how ridiculous it would sound if they told someone about it later. Two action stars take down a biker gang in the middle of nowhere, The Rock mused, raising an eyebrow. "Sounds like the plot of a bad movie." "Except it actually happened," John added with a smirk. "And honestly, I think we handled it pretty well. No stunt doubles required." Despite their lighthearted banter, there was an underlying seriousness to their reflections. Both men knew that what they had done went beyond mere heroics. It was a reminder of the responsibility that came with their fame. People looked up to them not just for their achievements in entertainment, but also for the values they represented: strength, integrity, and the willingness to stand up for others. The hours ticked by. The adrenaline from the night began to fade, leaving behind a sense of quiet satisfaction. They had made a difference in Cedar Ridge, even if no one outside the town would ever know about it. For John and The Rock, that anonymity was part of the appeal. They weren't seeking glory. They simply wanted to ensure that good prevailed over evil, even in the smallest corners of the world. Eventually, fatigue won out, and they decided to call it a night. As they turned off the lights and headed to their respective rooms, The Rock paused at the doorway, glancing back at John. "You know," he said, his tone softening, "we may never see Emily again, but she'll remember us. And maybe, just maybe she'll pay it forward someday." John smiled, nodding. "That's all we can hope for, right? To leave the world a little better than we found it." With that, they parted ways, each drifting off to sleep with the knowledge that they had truly lived up to the ideals they embodied both on and off screen. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows of their hotel room, casting a warm glow across the furniture. John woke first, stretching lazily before heading to the kitchenette to brew another pot of coffee. By the time The Rock emerged from his room, freshly showered and dressed, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. "Morning, champ," The Rock greeted, grabbing a mug from the counter. "Sleep okay?" "Better than I expected," John admitted, leaning against the counter. "After last night, I thought I'd be too wired to close my eyes." "Same here," The Rock replied, taking a sip of his coffee. "But hey, nothing like a good night's rest to recharge the batteries." They spent the morning discussing their plans for the rest of their stay in Cedar Ridge. Though the previous night's events had been unexpected, they still intended to enjoy their downtime. After all, they had come to this quiet town to relax, and they weren't about to let one chaotic evening derail those plans entirely. "We should check out that barbecue place you mentioned," The Rock suggested, his eyes lighting up at the thought of food. "If nothing else, we've earned ourselves a hearty meal after last night." "Absolutely," John agreed enthusiastically. "And don't forget the pie shop. We're making that happen too." By mid-afternoon, they ventured into town, blending seamlessly with the locals as they explored the charming streets of Cedar Ridge. The townsfolk greeted them warmly, completely unaware of the heroic deeds they had performed the night before. To everyone else, they were just two friendly visitors enjoying the simple pleasures of small-town life. At the barbecue joint, they indulged in plates piled high with smoky ribs, creamy coleslaw, and buttery cornbread. The food was as delicious as John had promised, and they ate heartily, savoring every bite. Later, they stopped by the pie shop where they shared a slice of warm apple pie topped with vanilla ice cream. It was a perfect end to a peaceful day, a stark contrast to the chaos of the night before. As they strolled back to their hotel under the golden hues of the setting sun, John couldn't help but feel grateful for the experience. "You know," he said, breaking the comfortable silence between them, "I think I needed this trip more than I realized. Not just the relaxation, but the reminder of why we do what we do." The Rock nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Me too, bro. Sometimes, life throws challenges your way when you least expect them. But it's how you respond that defines you." They walked the rest of the way in companionable silence, the weight of their actions settling comfortably on their shoulders. They hadn't set out to be heroes. They had simply followed their instincts and done what was right. And in doing so, they had reaffirmed the very qualities that made them beloved figures both on screen and off. That night, as they prepared to turn in early, John glanced at the Rock with a small smile. "Here's to making a difference even in the smallest ways. And here's to sticking together," the Rock replied, raising an imaginary toast. "Because teamwork makes the dream work, right?" With that, they laughed, shared a fist bump, and called it a night, content in the knowledge that they had left Cedar Ridge a little brighter than they had found it. The next morning in Cedar Ridge was calm and peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of the previous night. The sun rose gently over the horizon, casting soft golden light across the sleepy town. Birds chirped cheerfully in the trees, and the streets were quiet except for the occasional car passing by. For most residents, it was just another ordinary day. But for Emily Parker, it felt like a new beginning. After being rescued from the bikers, Emily had spent the rest of the night at the local police station, giving her statement to the officers. They asked her countless questions about what had happened, how she ended up in the alley, who the bikers were, and whether she recognized any of them. Though shaken, Emily did her best to answer clearly, describing Jake Malone and his gang as accurately as she could. She also mentioned the two men who had saved her life, though she only knew them by their names, John Cena and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. "They're heroes," Emily told the officer interviewing her, her voice trembling with emotion. "If they hadn't shown up, I don't know what would have happened to me." The officer nodded sympathetically, jotting down notes. "Don't worry, Miss Parker. We'll make sure these guys are caught and brought to justice. And as for Mr. Cena and Mr. Johnson, we'll do our best to thank them properly." By the time Emily left the station, the adrenaline that had kept her going through the ordeal had worn off, leaving her physically and emotionally drained. Her roommate Sarah picked her up and drove her home, staying by her side to offer comfort and support. When they finally arrived, Whiskers greeted Emily at the door, rubbing against her legs and purring loudly. It was a small gesture, but it brought tears to her eyes. Life felt fragile yet precious, and she vowed never to take it for granted again. Meanwhile, John Cena and The Rock continued their vacation in Cedar Ridge, determined to enjoy the remainder of their stay despite the unexpected events of the previous night. After a hearty breakfast at a local diner, they decided to explore more of the town, soaking in its charm and simplicity. They visited a quaint bookstore, browsed handmade crafts at a farmer's market, and even stopped by a park where children laughed and played on swings. The peaceful atmosphere was exactly what they needed after such an intense experience. As they walked through the park, John noticed a group of kids gathered around a makeshift wrestling ring someone had set up using old tires and ropes. Two boys were playfully grappling with each other, mimicking moves they'd likely seen on TV. John and The Rock exchanged amused glances before heading over to watch. "Looks like the next generation of superstars is already practicing." The Rock joked, folding his arms across his chest. John chuckled, shaking his head. "Maybe we should give them some pointers." Before either man realized what was happening, the kids spotted them. At first, there was a moment of stunned silence as they stared wide-eyed at the two larger-than-life figures standing before them. Then one brave boy stepped forward, pointing excitedly. Is that really you?" "It sure is," John replied with a warm smile, crouching down to meet the kids at eye level. "What's your name?" "Ethan," the boy said proudly, puffing out his chest. "I want to be a wrestler when I grow up." "Well, Ethan," the Rock chimed in, leaning down beside John, "if you work hard and believe in yourself, anything's possible. Trust me, I started out just like you." The kids erupted into cheers, bombarding the pair with questions. "How do you get so strong?" one asked. "Can you teach us how to wrestle?" another pleaded. For the next hour, John and The Rock entertained the crowd, demonstrating basic wrestling moves, sharing stories from their careers, and encouraging the kids to chase their dreams. "You see that?" John whispered to The Rock as they wrapped up the impromptu session. "That's why we do what we do, not for the fame or the money, but for moments like this." "Couldn't have said it better myself," The Rock replied, ruffling Ethan's hair as the boy grinned ear to ear. Later that afternoon, John and The Rock returned to their hotel to unwind. They lounged on the balcony overlooking the town square, sipping cold drinks and reflecting on everything that had transpired. The quiet rhythm of Cedar Ridge was soothing, a reminder of how different this place was from the fast-paced world they usually inhabited. "I keep thinking about Emily," John said after a while, his tone thoughtful. "She must have been terrified. I can't imagine what she went through." "She's stronger than she knows," The Rock replied, leaning back in his chair. "People always surprise you when they're pushed to their limits. She survived last night, and now she has a story to tell." John nodded, staring out at the horizon. "Still, it makes you wonder. What if we hadn't been there? What if no one had heard her cries? Then things might have turned out differently," The Rock admitted soberly. "But that's not what happened. We were there, and because of that, she's safe." Their conversation shifted to lighter topics as they tried to shake off the lingering tension. They joked about the kids in the park, marveling at their enthusiasm and creativity. "Did you see the way Ethan tackled that tire?" John laughed. "Kid's got potential." "He does," The Rock agreed with a grin. "Maybe we should start scouting talent early. Imagine finding the next big superstar right here in Cedar Ridge." As the evening approached, they decided to visit the diner where Emily worked. It wasn't far from their hotel, and they figured it would be a nice way to end the day. Plus, they were curious to see if anyone had heard about the events of the previous night. When they walked in, the hostess greeted them warmly, leading them to a booth near the window. Within minutes, word spread among the staff that John Cena and The Rock were dining at Betty's Diner. Servers peeked curiously from behind the counter, and customers craned their necks to catch a glimpse of the famous duo. A waitress named Linda approached their table hesitantly, holding a notepad in trembling hands. "Excuse me," she stammered, her cheeks flushing red. Are you really John Cena and Dwayne Johnson?" "We sure are," John replied kindly, flashing his trademark smile. "And you must be Linda. This is quite the diner you've got here." Linda beamed, clearly starstruck. "Thank you. Can I get you anything to drink?" "Coffee sounds great," The Rock said, winking at her. "And maybe a slice of pie? To share?" "Coming right up," Linda exclaimed before rushing off to place their order. While they waited, John glanced around the diner, taking in the cozy atmosphere. His eyes landed on a bulletin board near the entrance covered in flyers advertising local events, job openings, and community announcements. One flyer caught his attention. It featured a picture of Emily, along with a note thanking her for her dedication to the diner. Beneath it was a handwritten message. "To our brave Emily, stay strong. Looks like the town's rallying around her," John remarked, pointing it out to The Rock. "That's what communities do," The Rock replied, smiling. "They lift each other up during tough times." Their food arrived shortly afterward, and they dug in, savoring the homemade goodness of the diner's famous cherry pie. As they ate, they chatted casually with the staff and other patrons, learning more about the people of Cedar Ridge and their way of life. Everyone seemed genuinely kind and welcoming, embodying the spirit of a close-knit community. When they finished their meal, John insisted on paying for everyone's dinner as a gesture of gratitude. "Consider it our way of saying thanks for letting us spend time in your beautiful town," he told the owner, Betty, who looked both surprised and touched. "You didn't have to do that," Betty said, her voice thick with emotion. "But thank you. You two are welcome here any time." As they left the diner, the sun was setting once again, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. John and The Rock strolled slowly back to their hotel, enjoying the cool evening breeze. Despite the whirlwind of events over the past 24 hours, they felt a deep sense of fulfillment. They had come to Cedar Ridge seeking peace and relaxation, but they had found something even more valuable, a reminder of the impact kindness and courage could have on others. "You know," John said as they reached the hotel steps, "sometimes vacations aren't just about escaping reality. Sometimes they're about stepping into it, in ways you never expect." The Rock nodded, his expression thoughtful. "And sometimes those unexpected moments change you, for the better." With that, they headed inside, ready to rest and recharge, for whatever adventures lay ahead. Little did they know their actions in Cedar Ridge would leave a lasting impression, not just on Emily, but on the entire town. In a world often filled with uncertainty, they had proven that heroes truly do exist even in the most unlikely places. The days that followed the dramatic rescue in Cedar Ridge passed quickly, blending moments of reflection with glimpses of normalcy. Emily Parker, though still shaken, began to piece her life back together. She returned to work at Betty's Diner, greeted warmly by her co-workers and regular customers who had heard about what had happened. The bulletin board near the entrance now featured a new flyer, one that read, "Heroes Among Us," with a heartfelt message thanking John Cena and The Rock for their bravery. Emily couldn't help but smile every time she saw it, feeling a renewed sense of hope and gratitude. For John and The Rock, life in the small town continued as peacefully as they had originally intended. They spent their mornings exploring local landmarks, afternoons sampling the best food Cedar Ridge had to offer, and evenings relaxing on their hotel balcony, watching the sun dip below the horizon. But even in their downtime, they couldn't escape the ripple effects of their actions. People around town recognized them everywhere they went, offering smiles, waves, or quiet nods of appreciation. Some even approached them to express their thanks directly, sharing stories of how their intervention had inspired the community. One such encounter happened during a visit to the farmer's market. As John and The Rock browsed through stalls filled with fresh produce, handmade goods, and baked treats, an elderly man tapped John on the shoulder. He introduced himself as Harold, a retired teacher who had lived in Cedar Ridge his entire life. His eyes sparkled with admiration as he spoke. "I don't know if you realize this," Harold said, his voice steady but warm, "but what you did for that young woman, it meant more than just saving her life. You reminded us all that there's still good in the world, that when things get tough, people will step up." John nodded humbly, glancing at The Rock before responding. "We were just doing what anyone would have done in our position. It wasn't about being heroes. It was about helping someone in need." Harold chuckled softly, adjusting his glasses. "Maybe so. But not everyone would have stepped in like you did, and that makes all the difference." After Harold walked away, The Rock turned to John with a thoughtful expression. "You ever think about how much impact one decision can have? Like, we didn't plan any of this, we just followed our instincts, but look at how many lives are touched because of it." John shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "I guess that's the thing about doing the right thing. You never really know where it'll lead. All we can do is trust ourselves to act when it matters." Later that same day, John and The Rock decided to take a drive out of town, hoping to explore some of the natural beauty surrounding Cedar Ridge. They followed winding roads that led deep into the forest, eventually arriving at a serene lake nestled between rolling hills. The water shimmered under the afternoon sun, its surface dotted with lily pads and the occasional bird skimming across it. It was a breathtaking sight, untouched by the chaos of modern life. "This place is incredible," The Rock said, stepping out of the car and stretching his arms wide. Feels like something out of a movie. Or a postcard, John added, snapping a few photos with his phone. Definitely worth the detour. They spent the next hour walking along the shore, skipping stones across the water and enjoying the tranquility of nature. For a while, they forgot about everything else, the stress of their careers, the demands of fame, and even the events of the previous night. It was a rare moment of pure simplicity, a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful experiences come from unplanned adventures. As they sat on a fallen log overlooking the lake, John broke the silence. Do you ever feel like we're living two different lives? One where we're these larger-than-life figures and another where we're just regular guys trying to make sense of the world? All the time, The Rock replied without hesitation. It's weird, isn't it? On one hand, we've got millions of fans cheering for us, expecting us to be perfect. On the other hand, we're human, just like everyone else. We make mistakes. We question ourselves and we try to figure out our purpose. John nodded, tossing a pebble into the water. I think that's why nights like the one we had in Cedar Ridge matter so much. They remind us who we really are beneath all the hype. Not celebrities, but people who care about making a difference. The Rock smiled, patting John on the back. And that's why people connect with us. Deep down, they see the real us, the part that doesn't care about titles or accolades, just doing what's right. Back in town, Emily was starting to regain her confidence. With Sarah's encouragement, she began opening up about her experience, sharing her story with close friends and family. Talking about it wasn't easy. It brought back memories she wished she could forget, but it also helped her process everything that had happened. Each conversation left her feeling a little lighter, a little stronger. One evening, as she sat on her porch with Whiskers curled up beside her, Emily found herself thinking about John and The Rock. She wondered where they were now and whether they realized how much their actions had changed her life. She wanted to thank them properly, to let them know that their courage had given her a second chance. But she also knew they weren't the kind of men who sought recognition. They had acted selflessly, without expecting anything in return. With newfound determination, Emily grabbed a pen and paper and began writing a letter. It wasn't long or elaborate, but it came straight from her heart. In it, she thanked them for saving her, for reminding her that kindness still existed in the world, and for giving her the strength to move forward. When she finished, she folded the letter carefully and placed it in an envelope, vowing to find a way to deliver it someday. Meanwhile, John and The Rock prepared to leave Cedar Ridge. Their vacation was coming to an end, and they needed to return to their busy schedules. Though they were sad to say goodbye to the peacefulness of the town, they felt grateful for the memories they had made and the lessons they had learned. On their final morning, they stopped by Betty's diner one last time for breakfast. The staff greeted them with hugs and well wishes, making sure they knew they were always welcome back. Linda, the waitress who had served them earlier in the week, handed them a small gift bag filled with homemade cookies and a note signed by everyone at the diner. "You've been amazing guests," Betty said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for everything you've done. For Emily, for this town, and for reminding us what true heroes look like." John and The Rock exchanged a glance, both visibly moved. "The pleasure was ours," John replied sincerely. "This town has a special place in our hearts now." As they drove away from Cedar Ridge later that afternoon, the sun shining brightly overhead, neither man could stop smiling. They didn't know what the future held, but they left knowing they had made a lasting impact. Not just on Emily, but on an entire community. Weeks later, Emily received a surprise in the mail. It was a package addressed to her, postmarked from Los Angeles. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing a framed photo of John Cena and The Rock standing side by side, each holding a sign that read, "Stay strong, Emily." Beneath the photo was a handwritten note. "Dear Emily, we heard your story and wanted to send you something to remind you of your own strength. You survived something unimaginable, and that takes courage. Keep fighting, keep believing, and never forget how powerful you are. The world needs more people like you. With respect and admiration, John and the Rock tears streamed down Emily's face as she clutched the frame to her chest. She hadn't expected them to remember her, let alone send such a thoughtful gift. But in that moment, she understood something important. Heroes weren't just defined by their actions. They were defined by the way they inspired others to keep going, no matter what. And so, life in Cedar Ridge carried on, shaped forever by the unexpected intersection of ordinary people and extraordinary circumstances. Months had passed since the night Cena and the Rock saved Emily Parker from the gang of bikers in Cedar Ridge. Life in the small town had returned to its usual rhythm, but the memory of that fateful evening lingered like a warm glow in the hearts of those who lived there. For Emily, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, a journey toward healing and rediscovery. She had started seeing a counselor to help her process the trauma, something she initially resisted but eventually came to appreciate. Talking about her feelings didn't erase the memories, but it gave her tools to cope. With Sarah's unwavering support and Whisker's constant companionship, Emily slowly began to rebuild her confidence. She even took up painting as a hobby, using vibrant colors to express emotions she struggled to put into words. Her artwork became a form of therapy, transforming pain into beauty. One day, while browsing through social media, Emily stumbled upon a video clip of Cena giving an interview. When asked about his recent trip to Cedar Ridge, he mentioned how meaningful it had been to make a difference in someone's life. His words struck a chord with Emily, reigniting her desire to thank him and the Rock properly. Inspired, she decided to write another letter, not just to them, but to share her gratitude with the world. Emily posted the letter on her blog, which she had recently created to document her recovery journey. In it, she described the terror of being kidnapped, the relief of being rescued, and the profound impact John and the Rock's actions had on her life. She ended the post with a simple message. Heroes aren't always wearing capes. Sometimes they're just two kind men who happen to be in the right place at the right time. The response was overwhelming. Within hours, her post went viral, touching thousands of people across the globe. Messages of encouragement poured in from strangers, many sharing their own stories of overcoming adversity. Some even thanked Emily for reminding them that hope exists, even in the darkest moments. It was a humbling experience, one that filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. Meanwhile, Cena and the Rock were back in Los Angeles, juggling their demanding careers with personal projects. They had stayed in touch with Cedar Ridge through occasional updates from Betty and other locals, but nothing could have prepared them for the wave of attention Emily's blog post brought. News outlets picked up the story, praising the duo not only for their heroic act but also for their humility. Fans flooded social media with messages, calling them real-life superheroes. At first, both men were hesitant to embrace the spotlight again. They hadn't saved Emily for recognition. They had done it because it was the right thing to do. But as they read comments from people inspired by their actions, they realized the story had taken on a life of its own. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about spreading positivity and reminding others that kindness matters. "We never expected this," John admitted during a joint appearance on a late-night talk show. "We were just two guys trying to help someone in need. But if our story can inspire others to step up when it counts, then that's a win in our book." Rock nodded, adding, "It's not about being famous or strong, it's about having a heart. Anyone can be a hero. All it takes is deciding to care." Their words resonated deeply, sparking conversations about courage, community, and the power of ordinary people to create extraordinary change. Schools invited them to speak to students about leadership and empathy, and charities reached out, hoping to collaborate on initiatives promoting mental health awareness and anti-bullying campaigns. Both men embraced these opportunities, knowing they had a platform to amplify important messages. Back in Cedar Ridge, Emily watched the interview with tears in her eyes. Hearing John and the Rock speak so openly about their experience and the impact it had on them made her feel seen and valued. She knew then that their connection went beyond that single night. They had become part of her story, just as she had become part of theirs. Encouraged by the outpouring of support, Emily decided to organize a community event called Heroes Among Us. The idea was simple: celebrate everyday acts of kindness and bravery by honoring local individuals who made a difference. Whether it was a teacher going above and beyond for their students, a neighbor helping someone in need, or a volunteer dedicating their time to a cause, everyone had the potential to be a hero. The event took place in the town square, drawing crowds from neighboring towns. Booths lined the streets offering food, crafts, and activities for families. A stage was set up for speeches and performances, including a live band composed of high school students. At the center of it all stood a mural painted by Emily herself. Colorful depiction of Cena and The Rock, standing alongside silhouettes of ordinary people performing selfless deeds. When it came time for Emily to address the crowd, her voice trembled with emotion. "This event isn't just about two amazing men who saved my life," she began, clutching the microphone tightly. "It's about recognizing the goodness in all of us. Each of you has the power to make a difference, no matter how big or small. So today, let's celebrate heroes everywhere. And let's promise to keep inspiring each other to do better, be better, and love better." The applause was thunderous, echoing through the square as people cheered and wiped away tears. Among the attendees were Harold, Betty, Linda, and countless others whose lives had been touched by the events of that unforgettable night. Even Jake Malone and his gang had been arrested, thanks to the evidence collected during the investigation. Justice had been served, bringing closure to the community. As the sun set over Cedar Ridge, casting a golden hue over the festivities, Emily spotted two familiar figures walking toward the square. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized who they were. Cena and The Rock had returned, surprising everyone with their unexpected visit. "We couldn't miss this," John said with a grin, hugging Emily tightly. "You've done an incredible job putting this together." The Rock nodded, shaking her hand warmly. "And look at you, you're shining brighter than ever. Keep doing what you're doing, kid. The world needs more people like you." Overwhelmed with gratitude, Emily introduced them to the crowd, who erupted into cheers. Together, they unveiled the mural, symbolizing unity, resilience, and the belief that anyone can be a hero. As fireworks lit up the night sky, the people of Cedar Ridge celebrated not just survival, but triumph. The triumph of human spirit over fear, of compassion over cruelty, and of hope over despair. In the months that followed, Emily continued to advocate for kindness and courage, using her platform to uplift others. John and The Rock remained involved, supporting causes close to their hearts and encouraging fans to find their own ways to make a difference. Their paths may have crossed by chance, but the bond they formed transcended time and distance. Cedar Ridge would forever remember the night two unlikely heroes changed the course of a young woman's life, and in doing so, reminded the world that even in the face of darkness, light will always prevail.